Good morning. Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Mridula Lakkaraju from Osmania University. Today's module is from the paper African and Caribbean Writing in English. The module is Kongi's Harvest by Wole Soyinka. African theatre and drama. Besides providing entertainment, drama in Africa has many purposes socially, culturally, and aesthetically. Africa has many indigenous performances like music, mime, drama, and African drama seeks to combine all of them. This combination gives rise to a new kind of drama which includes music, drum beats, and dancers. A brief history of Nigeria. British influence in Nigeria began in early 19th century, and the period 1800 to 1960 is regarded as a British or colonial period in Nigerian history. Nigeria became an independent country in October 1st, 1960, and a republic on October 1st, 1963. After 1965, the country went through a period of political turmoil with several coups, counter-coups, and failed coups. From 1967 to 70, the country was ravaged by civilian war called the Biafran War, which resulted in 3 million civilian casualties. Introduction of the playwright. Akinwande Wole Soyinka was born on July 13, 1934 in Nigeria. He is popularly called Wole Soyinka. He belongs to the Yoruba tribe. After graduating in 1958, he founded an acting company and most of the plays were directed by himself. His decades of political activism included periods of imprisonment and exile. Soyinka also was the first African to win the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1986. In all, he has published 27 plays, 2 novels, 3 short story collections, 5 memoirs, 12 anthologies of essays, 3 screenplays, and 2 translations. His plays are the most popular among his body of writing, and they are called protest plays. The overview of the play. Although Soyinka has written poetry, fiction, non-fictional prose, he is best known for his plays. His plays can be seen as protest plays. Taking a critical look at Nigerian independence, exposing the pompous westernized intellectuals, mocking the religious impostors, opposing authoritarian leadership, and expressing disillusionment with post-independent developments in Nigeria, they are some of the major themes in Wole Soyinka's plays. His play, Kongi's Harvest, published in year 1965, is set in post-independent Nigeria. It revolves around the character Kongi, a modern dictator of an imaginary African country called Republic of Isma. Kongi has usurped the power of the traditional ruler, Oba Danlola, who along with his wives and advisors is imprisoned. Kongi tries to use the traditional harvest festival to establish the legitimacy of his rule. However, his attempt ends in chaos and the play ends with everyone fleeing the country, fearing the reprisal of the dictator. Although Kongi's character is said to have been inspired by 2 African politicians of the time, Soyinka's satire on modern dictators has much wider relevance. The characters in the play. Oba Danlola, the traditional ruler of the Republic of Isma. He is a man who is imprisoned by the dictator Kongi in an attempt to overthrow him. Dawodu, son to Sarumi and heir to Danlola's throne. He is sought by the secretary to mediate with Kongi on behalf of Oba Danlola. Secretary, Kongi's man, who organizes the harvest festival, and he represents Kongi on all his aspects. Kongi, the dictator of the Republic of Isma, who is very obsessed with his image. He wants the traditional ruler to peacefully pass on the baton of Republic of Isma into his hands. Seji, another character who owns a club, a very strong woman, and is daughter of Oba Danlola's staunch loyalist. There are some other characters which don't play such an important role in the play. Sarumi, a younger Oba, father of Dawodu. Wuruola, Oba Danlola's favorite wife. Ogbo Averi, head of conclave of elders. Dende, Oba Danlola's servant. The superintendent of the jail. members of the old Averi and members of Kongi's Averi. About the play. The new dictator of the Republic of Isma, Kongi, has taken over power by force from the traditional ruler and has imprisoned him. The traditional rulers, though critical of Kongi's rule, are not in a position to retaliate. The people of Isma have a tradition of celebrating a harvest festival at which best yam produced by the farmers is awarded a prize. The prize yam is then offered to the king in a show of acceptance of his rule. Kongi now plans to use this traditional festival to establish his rule. He wants the traditional ruler Oba to hand over the prize yam to symbolize a peaceful transition from a traditional ruler to the modern one. What happens to this play? What happens to this plan forms the plot of the play. The play has 4 sections: Hemlock, the first part, the second part, and the Hangover. The first part, Hemlock. This is the opening scene of the play. It starts with the rolling of the drums and the playing of the national anthem, prompting the audience to stand up. When the curtain goes up, the audience sees the traditional ruler Oba Danlola and his people with the retinue of musicians behind the bars. They now sing the parody of the national anthem, the juxtaposition of the national flag and their traditional ruler behind the bars prompt the audience to think, and it sets the tone of the play. Hemlock is a poisonous conifer. The scene in front of the audience is far from poisonous. It is of a group of people who are singing and dancing to the music. They are showing their dissent to the governance of the present ruler with a song. Their peaceful and almost comical way of protest brings out the poison spread through the administration, that is, the forced imprisonment. The group is reprimanded by the jail superintendent. Oba Danlola continues to sing, supported by Sarumi, the younger Oba. The songs are a satire on the political situation in Nigeria. For example, I quote from the text: "The pot that will eat fat, its bottom must be scorched," unquote. Exploitation of natural resources by force. I again quote from the text: "The sweetest wine has flowed down the tapper's shattered shins," unquote. One-way discourse of the government, which is insensitive to people's response. I quote: "With government diffusion sets, which talk and never take a lone word in reply," unquote. The superintendent finds the Nigerian national flag wrapped around Oba Danlola and quickly pulls it away in horror. Oba Danlola, being the traditional elder of the clan, and the superintendent, being a younger man, makes fun of him in a genial way. The jail superintendent represents the Oba and has to obey the dictator, Kongi. The elders, through their dialogue with the superintendent, inform the audience about the harmony their order has with nature. The true essence of symbiosis between the traditional rule and nature, as opposed to the exploitative practices of the new regime, is reminded to the viewers. Sarumi says, I quote from the text: "We lift the king's umbrella higher than men, but it never pushes the sun in the face," unquote. This part of the play ends with a clear depiction of the colonial power and the host country as a child and mother respectively. I quote: "Soon the head swelled too big for the pillow, and it swelled too big for the mother's back. And soon the mother's head was nowhere to be seen, and the child's slight belly was strangely distended," unquote. Coming to the second part, that's called as the first part in the play, immediately after Hemlock. The first part opens in Kongi's palace, a retreat in the mountains with his very own Averi, who, unlike the traditional king's advisors, are now fashionably called Reformed Averi Fraternity. The dialogues of the second part start with "We need an image," which is repeated 5 times. All of them accept the statement at its face value and try their best to come up with an answer. They neither question nor debate the need for an image. They try to create an image for Kongi which makes him more acceptable to the people. One interesting option is that of an idyllic image of a youthful leader. I quote, "Children handing the patriarch his pipe at evening, crouching at his feet to sip raindrops of wisdom," unquote. The discussion ends almost nonsensically. If the square of xqy equals qa into the square root of x, the progressive forces must prevail over the reactionary in the span of 0.32 of a single generation, unquote. They also define the aim of organizing the harvest festival as, quote, "to replace the old superstitious festival by a state ceremony governed by the principle of enlightened ritualism," unquote. The scene now shifts to the club owned by Seji. Dawodu and Seji are dancing when Kongi's secretary and his spies enter the club. Kongi's secretary befriends Dawodu and tries to pry information about Obadanlola, his uncle, the imprisoned traditional ruler. The secretary wants to tie up all the loose ends so that the harvest festival he is organizing should go on smoothly. In spite of the secretary's repeated requests through all possible channels, including through Dawodu, the secretary is not sure that Obadanlola will surrender amicably to Kongi. The scene moves to Kongi and his Averi, who along with him are forced to fast before the festival. The feverish discussions about the upcoming harvest festival continue. The secretary is bribed by Kongi's Averi into bringing them food. In return, they suggest a way out of the standoff between Kongi and Obadanlola. Kongi is to be persuaded to issue the release of all the political prisoners if Oba and his loyalists agree to surrender before him the next day at the festival. Kongi agrees to the plan. Meanwhile, news comes that one of the imprisoned men had died by hanging himself, and another man, who is Seji's father, has successfully escaped from the prison. Kongi becomes infuriated and calls back the release of the prisoners. We now move to the second part. It's the day of the harvest festival. Obadanlola and his members are released from the prison. They reach their home. They're all very excited to get dressed for the festival. Dawodu is to represent Obadanlola and his Averi, to hand over the yam to Kongi in a peaceful transition from the traditional rule to the modern one. Dawodu asks Oba not to come to the harvest festival, fearing a disruption of peace. Obadanlola insists on his presence. Dawodu is then told that a search is going on for the escaped prisoner, who also happens to be Seji's father, to bring him back dead or alive. The much discussed and planned harvest festival begins. The secretary, who knows that Seji has been Kongi's lover once, is shocked to find Seji as part of the dance troupe. He requests her to leave, but she refuses. Dende, Obadanlola's servant, has changed camps. He is now part of Carpenter Brigade, Kongi being the carpenter of the country, and the brigade are those who will help him build the nation. During the festival, loud gunfire is heard. An assassination attempt is made on Kongi. The soldiers are sent out to inquire on the origin of the gunfire. They find Seji's father, who has made an assassination attempt on Kongi, and they kill him. This information is given to Seji in front of Kongi, as he wants to see her break down. Seji, being a strong lady, does not break down, keeps up her composure, and walks away from the festival. She returns with her father's decapitated head and offers to Kongi on a copper salver. Kongi is shocked and terrified on seeing the decapitated head of an elder in front of the people who believe a lot in the traditional ruler. A traditional symbol of offering the yam to the clan leader in a show of harmony is now turned into a cannibalistic symbol, which instead of yam, Seji's father's head is offered on a copper salver. We now come to the last part of the play, Hangover. The last part of the play opens at Kongi Square. This is the aftermath of the Harvest Festival. There is debris from the earlier days' festival littered around. The secretary and Dende are seen holding on to their belongings, waiting for a chance to flee the country. Oba Danlola walks upon them, carrying his own possessions, ready to leave the place. The civil unrest that comes after the violent end to the Harvest Festival throws the people into disarray, and the Republic of Isma loses its harmony. The sufferers are all the three sects: the traditional ruler, the common people, and Kongi's staff. The last scene of the play sees them all fleeing the country, hoping to form an alliance against Kongi in some other place. And Soyinka offers no easy solutions to the problems of neocolonialism. The next part, the interpretations of the play. The play can be interpreted as a comic tragedy, as a political satire, and as a myth. We'll first look at the play's interpretation as a comic tragedy. The play starts with a comic note in Hemlock, where you find the elders of the clan dancing and singing parodies of national anthem. The seriousness creeps in with the death of one of the imprisoned elders in the jail. The interpretation of the play as a comic tragedy. There are numerous instances in the play which give a comical tone to the play. First, Hemlock, which starts with the traditional rulers of the clan singing and dancing to the parody of the national anthem, which makes us all smile. We also have an instance where Kongi, in search of a new image, poses for the photographer, trying to replicate the poses of the Christ, which also brings out a sense of comic to the play. This comic trail is suddenly brought to seriousness with the suicide of one of the elders who is unjustly imprisoned in the jail along with the traditional ruler Oba Danlola. The forced fasting of Kongi's Averi, the reformed Averi fraternity, is also very violent. It's an indication of what violence Kongi is capable of. Hence, this play can be represented, understood, and interpreted as a comic tragedy. The interpretation of the play as a political satire. In traditional African cultures, I quote, "The king was always looked upon as a savior, the symbol of communal health, and its active defender and promoter. As a result, the slightest blemish or weakness in the king was regarded as a disastrous to the land and its people." I also quote, "A high spiritual status was afforded to the sacrificial victim for the reason that he was the one chosen to represent the community to the high gods. His status was that of a hero." These traditional values turn Kongi's plans upside down. Using the symbols of the king, Kongi wanted to rule the Republic of Isma. The events of the Harvest Festival end up unsettling Kongi's plans. His composure is lost in front of his people. All the political maneuvers of Kongi to legitimize his power are undone, with Seji's father becoming the sacrificial victim and thus earning the highest status of a hero. Kongi, in spite of all the power in his hands, still cannot achieve his much planned political goals. We'll now look at the interpretation of the play as a myth. The use of myth, an integral part of Yoruba tribe, is used extensively by Soyinka. According to Yoruba belief, the fertility of the land and prosperity of the people are deeply connected to the virility of the king, who is a divine incarnation. In the opening scene, Hemlock, when Oba Danlola tries to bow mockingly before the jail superintendent, the superintendent is horrified. The yam festival, against the backdrop of which the play is set, also is a myth they strongly believe in. Kongi, through the harvest festival, chooses to claim the title of the king. Through his fast on the mountain, Kongi tries to evoke Christian images of a fasting Christ. The Last Supper with Dawodu, referring to Kongi as a messiah of pain. Kongi posing extravagantly to the photographer, who is helping with the image, reminds us of godlike postures. Finally, there are several references to Seji. Seji is called, I quote from the text, "The being of Seji swirls the night in portions round my head. Your eyes were bathed in tender waters, milk of all mothers flowed through your fingers. A coiled snake is beautiful asleep, a velvet bolster laid on flowers." Unquote. All these images interspersed through the text helps us understand the mythical aspects of the play. We now come to the final part of this lesson, the media adaptation of the play as a film. Produced in color by Kalpani Nigeria Films Limited and directed by Ossie Davis, this film was released in Nigeria in 1970 and had a running time of 85 minutes. The cast included Wole Soyinka as Kongi, Rashidi Onikoyi as Obadanlola, Banjo Solaru as Sarumi, Dapo Adelugba as Dawodu, Femi Johnson as the organizing secretary, and Nina Baden Semper as Seji. The film is considered important because it was a committed attempt to translate one of the Soyinka's plays into film. The film made some changes because it had huge potential to explore. The additions of the film, the visuals were shot around Ibadan, the market and street scenes too. A scene of Kongi's military boisterously drinking and singing, Dawodu and Seji visit to the shrine are all additions to the already existing play. The film had a different end when compared to that of the play. The play ends with Seji offering her father's head on a copal salver to Kongi, which upturns Kongi's plans to regain order in Republic of Isma. The film, on the other hand, had much alive Seji's father replacing Kongi as a dictator. Instead of a new order, we have an old order which is continuing with a new leader. Soyinka did not approve of this change and he distanced himself from the film. Although he had written the screenplay for the film and he acted as Kongi, the dictator. One of the biggest criticism the film faced that it was tailored to suit the American audience. The film at Nigeria was edited differently. We now come to the end of the module. To recap what has been done in this module, we started off with African theatre and drama. Then we looked at brief history in Nigeria, and we had an introduction to the author. And we also looked at an overview of Soyinka's work. Then we went on to look at the structure of the play, which is divided into 4 parts. We have the Hemlock, first part, second part, and the Hangover. We also looked at how the play is a statement against the authoritarian rule in post-independent Nigeria. We ended the module with the description of the media adaptation of the film. Hope this lesson was useful in your understanding of Wole Soyinka's Kongi's Harvest. For further reference, please refer to the e-text that's attached along with this. Thank you.